Okay, what we're going to look at today is production function. And when we look at the production function, what it primarily does, it evaluates how we establish values on factors of production, such as price of wages, rent, capital, etc. I'm going to share the screen with you. I'm going to bring up. Okay. We said we're looking at the market of factors of production. We go all the way back to when we were looking at the production possibility curve. You had your land, labor, capital. Those are your primary factors of production. In exchange for receiving those, for the firms to receive those factors of production, they pay rent, wages, capital, and interest on capital. All of that is determined by the market. And that's what we're going to look at in this chapter. Now, there's a couple of new terms that I bring into play. The marginal product of labor, average value product of labor. It's going back to what we looked at in the previous chapters with the marginal cost, marginal revenue. The only thing is we're comparing inputs and outputs. That's how we determine the product of labor. In this chapter, what determines a competitive firm's demand for labor? How does labor supply depend on wage, and what other factors affect labor supply? How do various events affect equilibrium wage and employment of labor, and how are the equilibrium prices and quantities of other inputs determined? Just like we looked at the very beginning, chapter 1, we're as economists, we're looking at how we consume scarce resources. The scarcer the resource, the more we're willing to pay for it. It's the same thing here with the marginal product of labor and production function. Now, in asking the experts, this is a big area of agreement. Nobody disagrees. We only have 5% that are uncertain. The question was, the statement was, the average U.S. citizen would be better off if a larger number of highly educated foreign workers were legally allowed to immigrate to the U.S. each year. The answer is absolutely yes, they agree. Now, when we look at labor, we're going to have to look at how we apply values to it. It's based on what we perceive we're going to get out of it as an employer, and we hire the worker, we expect a certain amount of return or value in return. We're going to see that later on in this chapter. Now, we look at the facts of production. As I said, we go back to the first chapters, land, labor, and capital. And it's all the pricing quantity is determined by the free market. Now, if we have a command society where we have a central planning agency, there won't be any need for this study of basic supply and demand. You will receive what they tell you to receive, not a bit more, maybe less, but not any more. That'll be predetermined. Now we have derived demand for factor of production. A firm's demand for a factor of production is derived from its decision to supply goods in another market. Now, we're not hiring labor. Well, if our product is we have temporary workers, we will hire the individuals and then we will sell their labor and their skills to jobs around the community or around the state or city or whatever. Doesn't mean if you are a temporary, you're in a firm that deals with temporary labor, doesn't mean you're unskilled. They do hire individuals with high skills. As long as they have somebody that wants to bring that labor in, temporary labor, they will find the person to fill that position. But if I'm a potato farmer, I'm gonna hire enough people to get the potatoes out of the ground. But I'm not gonna hire too many where the labor costs exceed the value of what I can sell the potatoes for. And we'll see some calculations where that applies. All markets are competitive. If there's profits to be made, companies will be there. And the more companies competing for that same product or position in the market, they may be willing to pay more for those skilled workers. And as firms, our objective is to maximize our profitability. So we need to know what the marginal value of each worker is. We need to know what the marginal product of labor is. For each worker we hire, how much additional output do we get? And we just can't hire an endless supply of workers. Our production will go down to zero. The example they give us here is Xavier, perfectly competitive market, hires a worker in a perfectly competitive labor market. When deciding how many workers to hire, Xavier maximizes profits by thinking of the margin. If the benefit from hiring another worker exceeds the cost, Xavier will hire that worker. Now, the cost of hiring a worker is wages. That's the price of labor. The benefit of hiring another worker, you hopefully it'll produce and sell more output, increasing revenue. If that is not the case, you don't hire. And if the demand for your product goes down, you're going to have to reduce the number of people working or popping popcorn. So there's a direct relationship between demand for the product and the demand for labor and the supply of labor. Here we see Xavier's popcorn production function. And we see the way he's set it up. There's labor, starts at zero. If there's zero production and zero people out there working, you're going to produce zero buckets of popcorn. One will create 30, two can create 55, 3 75, 4 at 90, and 5 at 100. What we need to know, and what they're graphing here, is the marginal product of labor. There's a change in outputs by a change in inputs. There's a change in Q divided by change labor. These are the inputs. These are outputs. And just like we did with the other marginal, it's between two intervals. In the first interval, we're looking for the change in quantity. It's going to be 30 minus 0 divided by 1 minus 0, which is 30 over 1. And our marginal product of labor is 30. They're going to show you a lot of formulas. Don't let them confuse you. Just remember the basic principles we've dealt with as far as marginal is concerned. Anytime you hear the term marginal, it's for each additional unit. That's what we're looking at here. So we get but the units we're measuring are the workers. So we got a marginal product of 30 for the first, and then 55 minus 30 is going to be 25. 75 minus 55 is going to be 20. 90 is 15, and 100 minus 90 is 10. So our marginal product labor we receive is sloping downward. Now our total product labor is going upward, but what we're receiving from each additional worker is diminishing. Any questions on that? Okay. Here's the formula that I was just mentioning, the marginal product labor. What we're looking at is the increase in the amount of output based on the increase of inputs. But we're looking at for the additional unit of labor. That's our inputs. There's our output and our input. Now we measure the cost in dollars, where we can compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And we have a value set to the product that we're producing. So if we have hire one worker and they can produce 30 buckets, hire a second worker, now we can produce 55. That second person is only adding 20 buckets of popcorn, or 25 buckets of popcorn, I think is what it was. The third, they bring 20. And the last one is 10. It doesn't mean that last person is a bad worker. We may not have enough equipment to handle that many workers. We may only have 2 popcorn poppers, and these individuals are crawling all over each other to produce popcorn. That is very inefficient. Now, if the price is below the value of product labor, we have to find another way. The cost of hiring another worker is measured in dollars. The benefit of hiring a marginal product is measured in units of output. Now, the output is going to tell us how many units they can produce. If we wanted a true value, we set up dollar value to each unit of the product. We use the table we saw in 1B, which shows the popcorn truck, etc. Now, the price of the popcorn is $5 a bucket. Now we can get the value of the labor, what they get in return. Okay? And this is what we'll see. Now I would advise maybe printing this page out or making it available. Because it's going to show us the formulas. We should be able to look at this information up here and the final answers and determine how this number is generated. We know the marginal product of labor. We did that calculation a few moments ago. The value of the marginal product of labor is different. We know the price of the product is $5. 30 times 5 is going to give us what? 150. Five times 55. we can in the marginal product labor, we know that this times, let me move this over here, there times 5 times 5. And that gives us each one of these numbers. Don't try to make it more difficult than what it is, because all it's telling us to do is P times the marginal product of labor. This is the value of the labor. If we graph that, we can see it's a downward sloping curve. It's telling us as we move along, this number will continue to fall. So we see the marginal product, the value of the marginal product labor diminishing as the increase in output decreases. Now, let's say the wage is $90 a day. And we look at this perfectly elastic line, which is establishing the price. And we're in a perfectly competitive market. All the individuals are going to be paid $90 an hour. We want to know what number of workers we should hire. We just look at this intersecting point. Right here. And then we go down, and that'll determine the number of workers we should hire. If we go beyond that, we're in the negative. If we're above it, we have opportunities that we're not taking advantage of. That's the optimum level. Now, if the number of workers diminishes and the price of labor goes up, we would see that it went to 110 because the number of workers have diminished. Now we look at it, we can see the optimum level would be 2. So if there's a decrease in the supply of workers, even if it's unskilled workers, we'll see the value or the cost to the business go upward. Be an increased market demand for those unskilled workers. Any company profit maximization, that's our objective. And we can look at our average social costs and we can say we want to produce at that level. We go back to chapters 15, 16, 14, 15, 16, I believe, with the perfectly competitive firms, monopolistic competition, monopolies, and oligopolies. All of them, now that we can input the revenue curve, they produce at the point where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. But wages, we look at the demand for the workers, which would be the value of the marginal product of labor. And if our supply curve went through here, that tells us the supply of workers available. Remember, once we start looking at workers and labor, they have the supply curve. You, as a business, are now shifting over to the demand curve because you're demanding their services. And this is establishing a value or a price on those services. Now, if we have changes in the output, and P increases, the value of product labor, which is the demand curve, would increase. Advances in technology, we can see an increase in marginal product to labor. Look at COVID. If we look at COVID, what has happened with COVID, we have the labor out there, but all the businesses are shut down. Let's say this was the demand for labor. This is the supply of labor. COVID restrictions were put in place. There's a price at equilibrium, quantity at equilibrium. The demand for those workers went down here. Unless those workers were willing to work for $1 an hour or 50 cents an hour, they couldn't afford them to have them on payroll. If they made more than $0 an hour, they couldn't afford to have them on payroll. Even though the supply did not change, the demand curve diminished so much that businesses had no options. Now, when the government subsidized them to pay workers to keep them on staff, they did that, but that was a subsidy. That was an artificial subsidy that kept those workers employed, not going after unemployment benefits. But we haven't seen the stimulus and payroll protection. Monies have not all been allocated, but they're needing more money. Those businesses are going to have to shut down. They have no option. Input and demand and output quantity. Marginal cost, the cost of producing an additional unit of output. You can see the formula there. We dealt with that before. In general, the marginal cost is W minus the marginal product of labor. Produce additional unit, hire more labor. As labor rises, MPL falls, causing WMPL to rise, causing MC to rise. And this is diminishing marginal product of labor. Competitive firms' rule is demanding labor is price times the marginal product of labor, which tells them what they're going to be charging for that product. What they're going to be charged for that product. Because remember, they're demanding those services. Now, we as workers and we as potential business owners, if you go to in the past, as wages have increased, you've seen the value of leisure time increase. I think France before COVID was, they're looking at 4-day work weeks, 30 hours a week, full time, because the workers were demanding more free time. And go back 70, 80 years in the US, I mean, the wages weren't that high, and to survive, you had to work. Now, by working, we're looking at the opportunity cost of not working. When I get to the point I can survive without working or live at my expected level of comfort upon retirement, when I reach that point, I'm retiring. Don't know exactly the date yet, but it's pretty close. And that's what everybody's looking at. Now, if your wages are lower, you're looking at, well, I need a job here to survive, job here. My objective is when I retire, I don't have to work. If I want to work, I can work. And if I want to work for free, I can work for free. But as wages go up, opportunity cost for leisure goes up as well. And we choose as a society to work less and enjoy other things. Now we see here that as the wages go up, labor supply curve will go up. We remember seeing that before, because at this level we have all these people down here, excuse me, they're willing to work at these wages. At this point, we have people that would like to work, but they're not going to work unless you pay them this area. They get more money. Now, if they get more money, they'll work. And they'll drive it upward. We'll see movement along the supply curve, not movement of the supply curve. So as wage rates go up, we have more people willing to work. That was one of the concerns, and still somewhat of a concern about some of the stimulus packages that came in with the COVID uh, relief package. They increased the unemployment benefits, guaranteed much more money than probably the people were making when they were working. And if you're going to pay people more to not work than to work, people are going to choose not to work. It may not be called retirement, but that's basically what it is. You're saying, okay, I think my time, yeah, you're going to pay me this much to not work. I'm not going to work. So that's something, the benefits were needed, the monies were needed, but you have to understand what happens long term if we just keep throwing money at it. That is not the solution. At some point, there has to be some change. The labor supply curve shifts. If we have an increase in the number of unskilled workers enter the market, let's see, let's say this is unskilled workers. That's going to be dealing with the wages. Based on existing numbers, if we say this is the supply of individuals we have here, and this is the demand value of them here, this will set the number of workers and the wage. Now, if there's a decreasing number of workers, we see the wage go up. So if we saw movement this way, we would see the wage go up and the quantity go down. But if we have a large influx of unskilled workers, this is what we see. We'll see the quantity of workers going up, Q of 1, and we'll see the price of workers go downward. Now, the individuals that were already here, now they have to work, but they may need to get 2 jobs to make the same amount of money. Now, if we have a major movement to the left, we see the wages go up. Basically, the cost of that factory production will increase. Remember, if there's a minimum wage set in here at the same time, there's a minimum wage. Let's say it was at this level right here. Now, they're only going to hire a smaller number of workers if the price is up here. Now, if it goes to here, the number of workers goes to here, you're not going to be willing to work. They may want more people to work, but you're not going to work. The price goes down. Now, the minimum wage is unbinding. If the wage is below the minimum wage. Any questions so far? What causes labor supplies? Whenever people change the amount they want to work at a given wage, changes in taste and attitudes toward work. Do you enjoy going to your job, or do you not enjoy going to your job? If you do not enjoy going to your job, where did you don't enjoy doing your job, you're gonna find other activities to do. When I was running the maintenance division for the airlines, I had crews of individuals that were on standby. At any time of the day, they could be called upon to have an airplane that's down in another city and needs repairs before it can be returned to the main base or whatever, an engine replacement, and so forth. We had a truck that was stocked with materials and tools. An airplane breakdown, we had a list of individuals that really wanted that money, because once they stepped on that truck, their wage went up. They got a per diem. They also got a lot of overtime, because when I sent them out, if it's a major job that's going to take 2 or 3 days, I'd send 2 crews. They'd work on that airplane for 24 hours a day until it came back. They would split shifts. But not every worker I had wanted to do that. I had workers that they were excellent workers, but they only wanted to work 8 hours a day. Period. No more, no less. It didn't mean they were bad workers, it just means that they had additional value in leisure activities. A lot of individuals that went on those trips, they were either needing the extra money, they had a growing family, or buying a house or a new car. A lot of them were single, and they work anytime, anywhere. They just wanted the money. Immigration affects it. The movement of workers from one location to the next. It could be from county to county, state to state, country to country. We have to take the movement of the workers into consideration. It will affect both the quantity available and the price per unit. Here we say the average U.S. citizen would be better off if a larger number of low-skilled farm workers were legally allowed to enter the U.S. each year. Now, this is kind of a double-edged sword. You see that 63% of the economists agree, 10% disagree, and 27% uncertain. There's two ways you can look at this. One, if there's more labor out there, that means the value of the labor will be held down, or the market rate will be held down, reducing the cost to produce a car or a bag of fertilizer. Then the price to the consumer is going to be lower because the cost of the inputs will be reduced. So would the average American be benefited by an increased number of unskilled workers? The answer is yes. But the unskilled workers that were already in the workforce, like I was showing here, this increased supply, now they're having to work at a rate. We have a new equilibrium. And the businesses, they're going to take what markets establishes the value of the product of labor. If there's more individuals coming in, the better. Microsoft and a lot of the high-tech companies, H-1 visas, they're always demanding more H-1 visas for additional workers, internet workers to come into the United States. And in doing so, they hire a lot of engineers from India, Pakistan, China. And in doing so, they diminish the value of the engineers that are already in place seeking jobs. So with the increased supply of engineers, you see here, the supply would shift to the right, wage rate would go downward, and the number of individuals available to work will be increased. Now, they look at some scenarios here with the changes in the population. As the baby boomers in the auto industry retire, you will see the number of workers available to do the job diminish, therefore the job cost or the cost to hire a worker will go up. Now, if we shift our demand to imported vehicles, we'll see the demand for the domestic vehicles fall. And when the demand for domestic vehicles fall, we're going to see reduction in forces, temporary layoffs, etc. When you have a lot of workers out there that are out of work, willing to work, the value of the labor in the marketplace goes downward. The technological process, we see the advances in that every day. Artificial intelligence is here. And let's do a speech by one of the CEOs in Silicon Valley. And he made a statement that minimum wage laws are the best friend of artificial intelligence. Because as you increase the wages, the cost of labor goes up, and they're not feel they get the value, the market product of labor coming out, the value of it, they go to automation. And you can see that in a lot of cities where they went to $15 an hour minimum wage. Now you go in there and you have a little kiosk and you have touch screen tablet, and you tell it what you want, and then it magically shows up. You don't have that one-on-one contact with individuals. And there's continued advances in artificial intelligence and other workforce changes. There's an increased demand for higher skilled workers. That they're going to get paid more money. And those individuals who have just a high school diploma or do not have a high school diploma, demands for their services will be diminishing. Education is important. Here we see the baby boomers retiring, the supply of labor goes downward, the wage goes up, and the supply of labor is falling. Here we see the demand go down, same thing, except the wage rate goes down and the labor goes down, the number of workers. Here we see an increase in demand. With an increase in demand, we'll see the wages go up and the supply of labor go up as well, because you can have more individuals willing to work that were not willing to work in the past. So this area here will be new workers entering the marketplace. We still have all the individuals down here, but now we have new people entering the marketplace. They're willing to work at the higher rate. We see productivity and wage growth over the last 60 years. We see wage growth and growth in productivity in the 60s, 70s. We saw another boom, 95 to 2010. It wasn't that great between 2010 and 2017. There were a lot of variables involved there as well. And if you include 2020, in the area of 17 to 20, you would have seen an uptick, increase in price of labor and productivity, but then you would see an immediate dive downward. Now, if we have a monopsony, that's usually one company that is in demand of all the, where they could control the majority of the workforce, the demand for workers in a community or a county or whatever. If you go to eastern North Carolina, you'll find firms that are there. Weyerhaeuser was there. And either you work for Weyerhaeuser or you deliver trees to Weyerhaeuser, or you fix the trucks to deliver the trees to Weyerhaeuser. You built the houses for the people that worked at Weyerhaeuser. They were in control of the local economy. And in doing so, they had control of pricing. It's like a monopoly, charges whatever you're willing to pay. They're going to pay you the minimum of what you're willing to make to work. Because if they have absolute control of the marketplace, you have no choice. Now we can look at land, we can look at capital. The market for land is just like the market for labor. It depends on whether we're going to rent or buy. Now, if there's a huge demand for land or properties in a given community or a city or a development area, what happens to the price of the other land? It goes up. If they're renting the land, the rental price goes up. So if we see the demand shifting outward, the price is going to go up. There will be additional quantity, but based on the slope of the supply curve, that's going to determine how much. Just like we looked at with workers, labor, the market for capital is set up the same way. And what you have to pay for the capital changes as well. If there's a huge demand for capital, it means less funds are available, and they will charge you a little more for that extra money. Now, if the demand is very low, they have a lot of cash on hand, banks and other things, credit unions, they'll reduce their rates and try to push out more money to make money on, because that's part of how they survive. If the demand for the loans is not there, they're going to be suffering. Right now, with coronavirus, if you wanted to build a house, that's great. You can get a low interest loan, but I went and bought some lumber the other day. That is insane. Prices that went up 200, 300% for lumber. So on one hand, it's good because it keeps the interest rate down, but as far as the production of other goods, it's not good because of the price of those other inputs have gone up tremendously. Now, if we're buying land, there's no need to buy it unless there's a stream of income, either through mining or lumber or building a facility there that generates profits. That's the reason we want those properties. Immigration. Unless they are compensated by others, many low-skilled American workers would be substantially worse off. A larger number of low-skilled foreign workers were legally allowed in the U.S. each year. Here we go again. 90%, 60% of the economists agree with that statement. 29%, they just don't know what to think. There's positives and negatives, but 11% disagree. And just think about it. If additional labor enters the workforce or becomes available workforce, it's going to keep the price of labor down. If I'm a corporation, I use unskilled workers, I like it. Because it allows me to be more profitable. Now, they get some of the conclusions. The neoclassical theory of income distribution, theory of developed chapter of factor prices, etc. Now, we're going to look at wages and wage inequality and discrimination and everything else in the next couple of chapters. This isn't the last time we'll talk about wages. Here's some things you can look at, but in a nutshell, go back to circle flow of income. The bottom part of the circle flow of income is how we deal with factors of production. How we deal with land, labor, and capital. That's what this chapter is all about. If there's a huge demand for capital, the interest rate is going to go up. If there's low demand, the interest rates will go down, or the cost of capital. Any questions? Or anything we discussed, or I discussed? No one's speaking today. Okay.